Welcome to the Jersey Justice Podcast, featuring your hosts, attorneys Gerald Clark and Mark Morris.
Chris, so I wanted to ask you, with this, I don't know, I guess some politician said when you enter the arena, you know.
Teddy Roosevelt, the man in the arena?
Yeah, the man in the arena, yeah. So I guess we're in the arena, and, you know, and then what's the other expression? Like we're in a pool with sharks or whatever. So with this whole thing that we're in, you know, in terms of these high stakes litigation, this kind of battle on paper, rate the justice system, you know, talk about the justice system a little bit if you can in terms of the interplay between politics and judges being appointed or being elected and the state system, the federal system. My opinion is in New Jersey, you know, you hear this stuff like The Sopranos and Jersey's corrupt. I got to tell you, I've never seen it. I mean, certainly I've been in judges. Some judges are better than others. Some are more experienced than others. But I have to say, for the most part, and kind of this, you know, one of the examples is like when Trump lost the election and said, I'm going to the Supreme Court, as if because he appointed those judges, they're going to say, no, you won the election. And they didn't do that. You know, and I think that overall, state and federal, the justice system is set up. You know, the framers, I think, of the Constitution were genius in a lot of ways, and it's the separation of powers. And frankly, I think what saved us in the last election was that separation of powers, and the Supreme Court justices being lifetime appointments, and they can't be touched in a lot of ways. That's really important. It's got its downsides, of course, but frankly, I think that's what saved our democracy the last time around. And in my experience in New Jersey with the justice system and judges is I think the system's pretty darn good. I think for the most part, the judges want to do the right thing. And as I said, some judges are better than others, but I frankly have never seen corruption. I've never seen it. I've seen some bad decisions and mistakes, but I've never seen nor heard of judges being paid off. Anything like that. So can you comment on your experience in terms of with all this high stakes litigation and kind of this war on paper, is the system fair? Are judges, is it working out? Do changes need to be made? You know, and the appointment of judges, like just what your experience has been, you know, because people can be cynical,
Right.
You know, the public can be cynical about things.
Well, I've been tried cases in New York, New Jersey, and Pennsylvania, and elsewhere. And, you know, some places the judges are elected, some they're appointed. And I guess I'm kind of a Pollyanna. I really believe that when people are put in position, they rise to the occasion and they try to do the right thing. And whether that's a judge or a politician, maybe with some exceptions, you know, in politics, you know, when George Bush was president, did I agree with all of his stances on all issues? No. You know, I was a lifelong Democrat, but I knew in my heart that when he went into work every day, he was doing the best job he thought he could do for the American people. That was, you know, and I believe that's how, and I think the judges are the same way. I'm not so sure about maybe one of the people running this time around, whether that was always his perspective, but, you know, I'm just a big believer that they do want to do the right thing. They sometimes get it wrong because people bring, you know, whoever they are to the table, and you can't necessarily eliminate that. But I think for the most part, I have great faith. I have great faith in the system. I do have a political theory, though. about where we are. You know, when I was, he said this before, when I was growing up, I never knew what my neighbors' politics were. I would try to judge people on what they did, how they interacted with their family, whether they're good fathers, good moms. That's how you saw people. And we get to a point, well, I think this is where it actually starts. You're going to laugh at this. Right? Why were Joe Biden and John McCain and that crew, why did they fight like hell but get along? And here's my theory. My theory was that back then, you had to live in the district when you were working. So your kid was on the same soccer team as McCain's kid, right? Your wife would see Mrs. Jones at the PTA meetings.
They had to live in Washington, D.C.
Yeah.
Got it.
You would be out at a restaurant and you would run into people. Your lives were intertwined. You could not get away from it. You had to interact with people, right? That you had to see people for who they were.
Yeah.
That they were different, but you lived in the same community. Once that stopped, and someone could just get on a plane or a train and come in for a vote and leave, I think the dynamic changed dramatically, and people stopped really listening to one another because they didn't have to. So if I was going to make one change in Washington, D.C., I'd make everybody who worked there live there at least during sessions. So their families, because now we're at a point where, and I'm guilty of this, I don't like myself for it. We're at a point now where we see a human being and we look at the human being and we put a label on them, and then we fill in the facts in our brains about this person. We know nothing about them, right? You see a guy in a Ford F-150 truck, and he's parked in a certain place, and all of a sudden you got a whole story in your head about what his politics were like. Which, by the way, you'd have a different story 20 years ago, right? And this whole notion of because we don't listen, to each other, that we just, and this is what you see, but the one thing great about being a lawyer is you have to break that down. You have to see people for who they are. But even but you see people and, you put a label on them and then people run to the label with no justification. You don't know their story. You don't know their family's history. You know nothing. So I think but the civil justice system changes that. I used to be, I don't know about you guys, I'm interested to hear what you say. I would go in and I would say, I don't want this kind of juror, this kind of juror, this kind of juror. And I'd have it in my head, if that one was an insurance broker, I don't want him. I want a union laborer. I don't want to teach, whatever it was. Whatever your focus groups told you. Now I got a whole different perspective. I don't know how you think. I'm interested to hear. I'm like, all I want now is smart jurors who are going to listen to the evidence and give me a fair shake. If I believe in my case, I think I can convince them I'm right. Because the labels just aren't true anymore. So I don't know. What are your thoughts?
I think we're still a little bit in the old school thought where we try and find out as much kind of intel as we can.
Well, you do.
Within the rules and be like, ooh, this person, we're looking for more, I think, the left-leaning soft sciences as opposed to, the engineer who was at the rally down in, South Jersey in Wildwood. But again, you try and, I've done that where I just take the juror for the person that they appear to be because you'll get some intel and be like, "Ooh, I don't know about this guy." And then he's like, "Oh, my hobbies are spending time with my family, my dog, and I like this activity. I just read this book." And by the end, I'm like I said, he's a libertarian. I'm not sure if that's a good thing or a bad thing, but I'm going to keep him, you know, and you just kind of go with a feeling. What, again, Jerry can probably speak a lot more to it than I can, but a lot of times I feel like it does come down to like the feeling you have of the person, and you try and put them into buckets, but they're, like you said, like it's, you know, it doesn't always fit.
I mean, I think my view on jury selection would be, first of all, I think we should have where the lawyers can ask the jurors direct questions. I mean, the thing where you're going through the judge to ask all the questions, the fancy term is voir dire. You know, I think the lawyers should be able to ask the prospective jurors questions directly. We don't really have these kind of mega mass tort cases where we're having jury consultants at our hip and focus grouping. So we're kind of doing it more, I guess, more of a traditional way. And we'll research jurors to the extent we can. We're definitely looking for, generally speaking, we're looking for more liberal type juries, kind of left juries. I think jury selection is everything. I mean, not everything.
Yeah, well,
jury selection is a huge part of it in terms of getting, from our perspective, justice at trial. I've learned a lot about jury selection over the years. I remember we had one case. It was a police brutality case, and it didn't turn out well for us. Like, we lost the trial, and without going into it, you know, it was a lot. It was during the George Floyd situation going on, and you know, we kept one juror on. First of all, in this jury pool, you know, we were kind of amenable to having African American jurors on the jury because it was a police brutality case, and we were in the middle of this George Floyd thing. And there was one African American in the jury pool, and we kept him on the case. He happened to be a cop. So that that case didn't turn out well. But jury selection, you know, you have to be in the courtroom. You got to be in the room. You have to have a feel for the people. I really don't want any strong right-wing people. No offense. I was very conservative at one point.
Well, it depends on the case.
I think you want smart jurors for sure. Because here's the thing. When I was a defense lawyer, you'd be sitting there, and your boss would drop the file on your desk, go defend the case, no matter what it was. So now on our side, we select our cases. Don't pick crappy cases. Right. Like you talk about frivolous lawsuits. I've never seen a frivolous lawsuit. Right. You know, I mean, even the great lawsuits, they fight them so hard. So I think, like you said, Chris, I think it's important to have a good case, and then to have smart jurors that can understand it and that can frankly get through the defense smoke and mirrors stuff. But yeah, that's my kind of thoughts on jury selection. I mean, and thinking you can read jurors. I mean, you know, that's always hard. I remember we'd go through a trial, and we'd win the trial, and the one juror that you thought was on your side the whole time is the one dissenter, and then the one juror that you thought was against you, you know, was the one that was in favor of you. So it's hard.
And we've been at trials too where the other side has hired like a jury consultant. Person's there the whole time watching, and you know, at the end of the case, the woman came up and she's like, "They hate you guys. This jury's going to give your client nothing." And they came back with like almost a $3 million verdict. So there really is, like, you know, and again, this is actually probably a good organic segue.
I tried a case. I just tell you about this.
Yeah.
So I tried a case in Middlesex where they had two. Because it was broadcast, the case, they had two mock juries in the hotel. And every night they would go back and they would debrief with the mock juries. So, and you could see the next day that they would change course. So totally change course. So one day we're trying a case, and the defense lawyer was a woman. She was a tough lady. And, you know, she dressed like she was a tough lady. And one day she walks in and she had like this like kind of red flowery dress on, and her hair was all different. And I'm like, what happened? The mock jury tell you they didn't like your outfit?
Yeah, because we do. I mean, it is wild though, talking about juries and stuff.
Yeah.
Like again, you're gonna think I stalked you, but
Right.
like, you know, we joke around that like, oh, you know, maybe the jury didn't like our tie. Like I saw, you know, and you've obviously gone on to have a phenomenal career, but you lost like an asbestos case very early on in your career, and you're like, I had this mustache. Maybe they didn't like my mustache.
How do you learn? I mean, you
I'll
remember
tell
all
you,
this?
they did a good article on you in the Asbury Park Press.
Yeah.
But you know, so there really is. There's no.
All your
like,
insecurities come out.
Yeah.
I never grew the mustache back after I lost that case.
It's funny. This is
I
totally
thought I would look sinister.
unrelated to the law, but my dad, police officer, had a mustache like basically my whole life. He was classic cop, like thick, big mustache. When he shaved it off, my little brother cried. He's like, "Who are you?" Couldn't recognize him. It was a wild thing, but
That's funny.
But back to the, you know, when you talked about 9/11, it is crazy, and I've talked about this before. Like when you like, and we've talked about this on other kind of our podcasts. Like, you know, as a lawyer, we're like we're highly regulated. We have the Bar Association, and they can yank your license. They can discipline you. We can't say whatever we want. If we're at a deposition, we can't curse the other side out. We could get in professional trouble for that. And in a way, it's like, well, geez, this is America. I should be able to say what I want. So there is a bit of a restrictive aspect to that, being a lawyer and being so regulated by the bar and by judges. But on the other hand, it brings me back to the discipline I was instilled at me at Catholic school with the nuns. Like,
Did you get hit with a ruler?
yeah, well, I got punched in the chest in high school. I told that story by a Christian brother. So you have that discipline. And so in a way, as a lawyer, I don't like it because I want to have my freedom. But in the other way, it's a good thing. And for Pete's sake, like, these politicians need it. I mean, like, how can you be up at running for president and say, punch the guy, knock the guy out? I mean, what is that? And all this, like, this, it's so disrespectful. And when you compare, because I love watching on YouTube like an old Reagan show. I mean, that guy was so classy, and the Bush family. For whatever you think about their politics,
That's right.
they were classy statesmen, respectful people, and the mutual respect in politics in the 80s and the 90s when you have an interview or a debate, and it's just gone down to like street fighting now, and it's just like comparing to the professional standard that we're held to. If we ever said anything like that, the judge would have us sanctioned. Like,
I find that really interesting. When I don't know enough to know when they made that law where you don't have to live in Washington, D.C. anymore to work in Washington there. But like, because we always talk, and again, it's a reoccurring theme, but like with social media, how you can go on social media and if you disagree with someone, be like, you suck, you loser, like, why would you ever think that? That like with Washington, if you've got someone out in like, you know, you said North Dakota before and someone else in Maine and they disagree, they can both go on Twitter or X and be like, your ideas are so stupid, you're such a loser. But if you're walking out for lunch and you say, oh, hey, you know, hey, buddy, how's it going? Like, you might disagree, but you're not going to talk like that to each other.
Well, that's why I worry about for young lawyers.
Yeah. Oh,
that
yeah.
They don't have that physical contact. And, you know, it's all social.
Mm-hmm.
And look, I'm all about Zoom. It's all, you know, but not having that contact, I think I'm worried about that for young lawyers because they don't see the other side for who the people are a lot of times.
Yeah.
You know, is that defense lawyer going to come to you, to that young lawyer 10 years from now with a problem because they know you're doing, I don't know.
Yeah.
You know, and I think it's probably not just law in general, you know.
Kind of back to what you talked about early on before too. I know there's different schools of thought, like people litigate different ways, but like, you know, having a defense attorney refer you a case and things. Some of my like most hard fought cases, the ones that have been contentious but respectful, those are the guys that then are, or girls who are like, you know, I want to refer you a case. Or when I go do a certified civil trial attorney application, I say, hey, can you be a reference? And they're like, yeah. And those aren't cases where, you roll over and say, oh, hey, I want to be your buddy. Those are cases where you fight. But there's a way to do it. And you're absolutely right. Like, it's one thing when you're behind a screen as a human being, as an attorney, as opposed to you go in for a trial call in Middlesex County and you say, oh, hey, how's it going? Like, yeah, I had you on that case. How you been? And
So I think just a couple points on that. Like, I think the problem with social media is it's not a real human interaction. There's AI involved. It's like a bot. You're dealing with a screen, and humans evolved like we're talking now. Okay, face to face, 3-dimensional, and I think there's a real problem with that, and I think that's causing a lot of the vitriol. But let me ask you a question, Chris. When you're litigating a case, is it your goal to be friends with the defense lawyer? Like, I find that the defense lawyers are nicer and happier when they're winning, and when you're winning, they tend to, not all, they tend to get nastier and not as nice.
I at least feel like with depositions, I can always tell when I'm scoring points, like when they start being like, objection, when they start jumping up.
So what's the thing? I mean, we have to be happy. Our duty is to the rules, to our ethics, and to our clients. But how do you navigate that when you have, should Beasley Allen be nice to the defense lawyers that are trying to get him kicked off the case, or should the experts be respectful to the defense lawyers that are suing them to try to get, like, how do you navigate that? What's the balance that you strike between not being a jerk, advocating zealously for your client and for justice, and having a good rapport with defense lawyers? Like, how do you navigate that?
Well, I always tell the younger lawyers in our office, I guess they're all younger now, that it shouldn't be your mission to try to make the other lawyer look bad. Right? You can make his client look bad, you can make the corporation look bad, but you're not going to get anything by making the lawyer look bad. And that's just a respect thing. And I think that's really what I'm talking about. And if a lawyer on the other side makes a mistake, I'm not there to try to eat up the mistake and drive a stake into the lawyer, because you know what? I'm going to make a mistake at some point. And, maybe somebody will, and I've had people come after me when I've made errors. So I think respect is it. I don't think you have to be their buddies during a course of a case, but people know when you're treating them with respect. And that's all I think is required. Now you do get friendly with people after a while, but then when you get in the courtroom, you take off the gloves, to the extent that you're permitted. But I never want to make another lawyer. I have a great mission. I want to make their client look bad, right? The cases I'm involved in, a lot of times the clients are bad, but I don't want to make the lawyer look bad. And I think they get the difference, And I'll clown around in a deposition too, I won't be totally off the wall.
Yeah.
So just a couple more, I guess, like topics that we want to hit, because this is what always organically ends up happening. You're a fascinating attorney person. We could talk to you about hours and hours worth of stuff, but just something I care about. Like, what do you see with like technology? We talked about before, like, I think Jerry, you mentioned, insurance companies allegedly hiring investigators to go through, the paper, the trash and things. Like, that's going to go by the wayside. It's going to be people trying to hack into, your security system, and just how much technology is involved in our profession, especially with like artificial intelligence, what role that plays in litigation, if any.
Yeah, I guess the question I have is, with young kids coming up in college and stuff, and they're trying to pick a career, and a lot of people are like, geez, I got to pick a career that's not going to be rendered obsolete by AI. Are lawyers going to be rendered obsolete? How's that changing the whole profession?
Just a quick aside, I don't know why this is worth sharing, but right before I came into work, I looked at something on social media that was like, when everyone says AI is coming for your jobs, I'd like to see AI steal catalytic converters. It's like, it's like, what in the world? But
well, look, from a strategy perspective, I've always been of the opinion that we have to be ahead of the curve on the plaintiff's side. The way we fight a 1,000-person law firm is being better, smarter, more adept.
And having better facts in your case, because
and
they can't hide from the facts.
Right.
Yeah.
But having command of the technology, I really think matters. I remember once I was taking a deposition not that long ago, and I have everything on my iPad, every exhibit, it's all done. I control the whole environment. And I remember once the defense lawyer actually made the objection, unfair use of technology. Right? And I kept maneuvering manipulating the documents and blowing them up and he actually then called the judge. And the judge says, well, what are you doing? And I told him. And the judge said, well, I'm not going to tell him to stop doing that. Now, the corporate rep was sitting right next to him. How do you think that corporate rep acted the rest of the deposition? He was compliant because he thought his counsel wasn't up to the task.
Yeah.
So I really, especially on Zoom, to have control of the technology is really important. So I'm all over it. I'm studying the AI. I think it's going to change. Now, what's the other answer to your question? I think it will take, in the law business, it'll make us more efficient, but it will take the lower level tasks away at some point, right? When you're going to ask a paralegal to do a deposition or a trial summary, and they have something in AI called, I don't know if you know about this, called the hallucination rate, right? The hallucination rate is how much is the AI making up of what's there, right? Now, they're not on the internet, they're on a document, right? And say the hallucination rate is 5%. In other words, 5% is just garbage. Well, I don't know. If you have a pretty good experienced paralegal, you may decide that based on what you want, right, the hallucination rate is greater than 5%. So, and that's only going to improve.
Right.
Or what happens now when you get a document dump? I was working on one yesterday. Someone gave me 1 million documents, and I had all the documents indexed, right, and OCR'd. And I'm sitting there doing Boolean searches. Give me every document that says Jerry within 3 words of Clark, and I think I'm all that, right?
Yeah.
And then I have to look at 400 documents out of the 1 million. Well, we're a year away, in my opinion, maybe 2, but I doubt it, where you're going to go on, just like you're on ChatGPT, just like you're on Gemini, and you're going to ask it a question. You're going to say, please find blankety blank.
Yeah.
And because it will work in natural language, it will go through the documents, it will pull out the 5 documents that matter with summaries. And that will stop the defense, by the way, from burying the truth in a document dump, right? Because that's what happens now.
Yeah.
Sometimes you just got to get lucky. The other thing I think is going to change in the legal...
I just got 18,000 pages in a case.
Yeah.
I think maybe 5,000 I asked for.
Right.
And they gave me another, bad at math, but 13,000 I didn't ask for, just to bury me in it, to hide the needle.
But I think that's going away. So we have to be on top of that. And I do think that you're probably going to get to a point where low-level legal research will take the place of what you would have a first-year lawyer do.
Yeah.
Right? So I'm not talking about somebody who's going out to the internet and making stuff up, because that's what's going on. People now are having, hallucinated briefs.
Yeah.
But think about a trained AI tool that goes into Westlaw, and you say, well, give me the elements of a cause of action for public nuisance.
Yeah.
It's going to give it to you. Now, that doesn't mean, so what does that do? That doesn't replace the lawyer. the lawyer still has to do the strategic thinking.
Yeah.
It still has to apply it to the facts. It still has to make strategic decisions based on it. But probably that level, in my opinion, will be a lot more streamlined. That's just my sense.
There's such a humanity, I mean, in terms of kids thinking about being lawyers or not, if it's going to get overcome by AI, there's an ultimate humanity element and aspect, and it's not even an element and aspect, it's everything to a judge deciding a case. Because ultimately, you know, a judge deciding a case and an appellate court making law and applying facts to a law, ultimately it's a policy decision. It's about what's right. And the beauty of the law is that it's flexible enough to cover the proper situation and do the right thing in the right situation. And I don't think AI, God, I hope I'm not around or my kids aren't around if AI is ever making the ultimate decision as to what's right and wrong.
But you know, where does it stop? So someone told me the other day, which I fell out of my chair. They told me that there are programs out there now that advanced jury consultants are using that will put a camera on a box of jurors, read their facial expressions, analyze that, and create a product. Now, I don't know how good that product is, but it's, I don't know, do I want that in a courtroom? You know, I mean, I don't know where the judgment stops. You know, whether that's something that should even be allowed in a courtroom. But
I was going to say,
you know,
will we start seeing laws like no AI allowed in courtroom? Like, you know, the same way. Remember a lot of courthouses with like cell phones, you have to get like specific.
It's going to have the facial recognition too, so you'd be able to look at a jury pool and know, bam, and have a whole what they are.
Absolutely.
We should have hit this earlier on too, because it was something that we were talking about before we started recording, and I was going to try and segue into it talking about jury selection, but there's just so much to cover. But you have a book that you just came out. What's that called, and what's that book about?
It's Trials and Triumphs. It's published by the American Association of Justice, and it's the product of probably 2 years worth of research. What I did is I spent the better part of 2 years interviewing lawyers from all over the country, and I asked them 3 basic questions. What do you think is the most important part of a case? How do you prepare for it? How do you execute it? Right? And there were a lot of different opinions, right? So the second question was, what does it take to become a successful trial lawyer? And 3, what are the lessons you learn from losses, which was probably ultimately the most interesting piece. But it's very interesting when you ask them. So I interviewed, I think, maybe 70 lawyers. I mean, I'm talking about people that you would know.
You mentioned like Rick Friedman, like Keith Mitnick, some big name.
Yeah, Lanier, Jerry Spence, Ron, people you would know. And local people too, because I wanted to mix it up. Mm-hmm. A lot of people wrote books just on openings or just on case preparation. So obviously I said, what's the most important thing? They say case preparation. But the interesting thing is, so I would ask everybody the same questions. But, you know, if I interviewed 70 lawyers, men and women, you know, only 10 would tell me jury selection. 10 would say cross-examination. Tom Klein would say recross, right? That's the most important part of a trial, he would say. So, you know, it's fascinating because then you meld all these perspectives. So you have 10 people just on openings, right? Another, you know, Lisa Blue, who's probably picked more juries, you know, and how does her philosophy, how is it different than Mitnick's philosophy or Panish's philosophy? So, I learned more than I could have ever learned, but it was a fascinating exercise. So any Supreme Court justices, Supreme Court advocates,
Wow.
I even asked Barry Alban, I said, tell me what bothers you the most? What mistakes do lawyers make the most? So, it's actually, it was fascinating.
And the book itself, is it kind of like a roadmap of, from, I don't know if it starts with case intake to, fact discovery, depositions, trial opening?
All the way through, from case intake to developing your case theme, to planning your discovery, to taking depositions, openings, direct and cross, demonstrative evidence, closings, what you're supposed to do during your case to preserve your appeals, all those, maximizing damages. It was pretty amazing, I have to say. Pretty amazing.
Hey, Oscar, can you just make a note to put it in the show notes, a link? What's the title of the book?
Trials and Triumphs.
Yeah, so that people can click on that.
I'm excited about that book.
I mean, it's really awesome.
Yeah.
All the proceeds go back to AAJ. I mean,
that's
and
great.
everyone agreed that that's what they were
What's
doing.
AAJ? Why is AAJ a good thing for people to support?
AAJ, the American Association for Justice. It's the National Trial Lawyers Group. It has multiple missions. It gives us a voice in Congress, which is important. It helps with judicial selection. It has a role in that. It spends a lot of time fighting unfair laws on the state and federal level, trying to get laws passed. It works inside of federal and state agencies to try to help them make the right decisions and to educate lawyers.
So people understand this. When you say that AAJ, the American Association for Justice, fights against bad laws that are proposed. So I asked this question at depositions. Give me the 5 most important things. Can you give us an example of a bad law that's been proposed that NJAJ has been against, or that AAJ has been against? What was the one that Mike Farrar, it was something about medical malpractice he brought up. There was some crazy law that was passed.
Where you weren't able to sue doctors or something, insane.
Well, I've seen them. Loser pays.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Right? They try to stick that in legislation. Loser pays because they know if they ever get that in a case, it's over.
So loser pays would be the woman that you represented that died a terrible death from mesothelioma asbestos. If something happened where the case got thrown out, she would then be responsible to pay hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars in defense in the money that the asbestos company paid their lawyers.
Correct.
So that sounds fair.
Or forced arbitration.
Yeah.
Where they put arbitration clauses in every contract you look at and take away your right to a jury.
And arbitrations are by nature secret. No
Correct.
one knows what happens. And
Correct. So that's a constant battle at the state and federal level.
It's another crazy one too. Since we're talking about this. Miss Cortez, whose apartment was overrun by rats. As part of her lease agreement, she has to sign something that says you can never bring a class action lawsuit.
Correct.
How about those?
Yep, that's there, and that's constantly. And they don't give up.
Right.
It's always buried, and and the legislative process is hard, right? Because there's a bill, it's not in it. Then there's a House bill, it's not in that one. But the Senate bill and the House bill don't match. So then they have to reconcile the bill. And somehow during reconciliation, somebody wants to slip in, this one little provision. It's no big deal.
Yeah.
One little provision, and everyone wants to get the bill over the threshold. So so somebody has to be there to backstop it. And if you're not there, and we have great American Association for Justice and NJAJ have great lobbyists. They are there. They know what's going on. They know every bill. They know every change to every bill, and that's what you need. Otherwise, it can go away. It's fair. I mean, 30 years ago, we came within one vote of losing asbestos litigation. One vote.
Just there'd be no asbestos litigation.
Yeah, one vote. And if it wasn't for the American Association for Justice, tens of thousands of people would have been denied justice.
And that was on the national level?
Yes,
in
on a national
Washington?
level.
Wow. There was a national asbestos bill to ban asbestos cases,
Yep.
to essentially give the asbestos industry immunity.
Right.
Similar to the vaccines.
And right now we're fighting in the Congress. I had a client testify before Congress last year. We're fighting this whole thing with the Texas two-step. I don't know if you know about what the Texas two-step is.
No.
So what happens is you take a solvent corporation that has a lot of laws, and this can happen. This is a really existential threat to the
Right.
civil justice system.
This is the bankruptcy
Okay.
stuff?
What happens is they take a solvent corporation and they say, well, there's too many lawsuits against this corporation. So they split the corporation in two, right? They take the liabilities and they put them in a Texas corporation because they can, and they put the assets in another corporation. And then they bankrupt the corporation with the liabilities with very little assets, and they say, sorry, go for it.
Yeah.
Go chase them. And this is what we've been fighting now for 3 years.
Wow.
There's legislation that's dealing with this. And think about it. Yes, it could apply to a Monsanto or something like that. I'm making a name up, right?
Yeah.
A monster company. They
Yeah.
could do it. But what stops them, if they're successful, what stops it from a hospital system who has too many medical malpractice cases
Yeah.
to say, oh, you know what, we'll just call the MedMal subsidiary over here. We'll put the liabilities over here. What stops it from a trucking company that has too many drunk drivers and too many trucking accidents? That's what's being fought. It's not only being fought in the courts, but it's being fought on the federal level right now. Right now. It's funny, right now, I have a case before the U.S. Supreme Court where we're fighting this issue.
Is cert been granted?
We're amicus.
Okay.
Who are my clients? You're going to laugh at this. Dick Durbin, Sheldon Whitehouse, and Josh Hawley, right? Now, who would ever thought that I would have those three as a client in a case? But we're amicus. I represent them as amicus in a fight over, bankruptcy issues because they are against a perversion of the bankruptcy system.
Right.
So we're fighting it in the federal courts, we're fighting it in the appellate courts,
Wow.
and we're fighting it in the legislatures.
Yeah.
And this goes on all the time. So we need organizations like the American Association for Justice because, we have to put food on the table. We have people to represent.
And listen, people need to understand too, for whatever public listens to this, like they have to get involved. Like I think a lot of the vitriol in politics and all this stuff, I almost think a lot of it's designed to just have people tune out so they can keep on doing what they're doing without people have to get involved. Like who gets elected is critical. And the people that get elected appoint the judges and the justices to the U.S. Supreme Court and all these circuit courts. And it is critical. It affects your everyday life. It affects the Mrs. Cortezes of the world and stuff. It's really important for people to get involved.
Well, look what's happened in the last year with abortion rights and gun laws. What do you think is going to happen
they'll pass a national ban on abortion. They'll try it.
What do you think? What do we think is going to happen if there's a big changeover in 106 days from now?
Yeah.
And maybe the most important thing that comes out of that election is who picks the next Supreme Court justices.
That's right.
Yeah.
Right. And what's you can see what's happening now.
Yeah.
It's scary.
This
right?
stuff matters.
Yeah.
But I have to say, to give a little optimistic view on this, like Sisyphus, is that it, pushing the rock up the hill? It's been going on forever, and I started reading a lot of like America's original writings. Like I read, it's the I think it's the library. It's not the Library of Congress. It's like the National something. It's this private company that publishes and proliferates all the America's original writings. And I was reading like Washington's original writings. I was reading the writings on all the original writings on the Civil War, which is soldiers writing from home, generals writing to other generals, the president writing to his generals, all the original writings, and it's fascinating. And it was really bad back then. Like the vitriol and the fighting and it's been going on forever. And
During Jefferson,
yes. So look, I think the Republic will survive. I think we'll be able to get through this. All this stuff's been going on for a long time in politics.
Well, this is what I tell my kids, though.
Yeah.
Right. So my dad's getting up there, like your dad.
Yes.
When my dad's grandfather was alive during the Civil War. Right. So they are people who our lives touched somehow.
Yeah.
You can't just assume everything tomorrow is going to be the same as today.
Right.
You can just look at what one life touches and see how things change if you do not work hard to protect what you believe in.
Yeah.
You know? And I think that's what we have to do.
I'll never forget when George Bush Sr., you talk about how times have changed. I mean, people get uncomfortable talking about politics and stuff, but I don't know, I guess I'm a bit fearless on it. Like when Trump lost the election and he gets up there at 12 o'clock at night and says, it was a fraud, it was a sham, I'm going to the Supreme Court, and you juxtapose that to when Bush lost to Clinton and his concession speech. And I'll never forget what he said, because I loved George Bush, the father. I thought he was great, gentleman, World War II hero, shot down. If my history serves me, but I remember what he said, and I say to all the young people, stay involved, do public service, that meant a lot to me, and I remember that, and it's really important for people to get involved.
Is that a good note to end on? Because that's the truth.
No, because we got to talk about windmills.
The turbine thing.
So listen, I grew up on the Mark clearly has a brief or something.
I've got nothing I need to do. Because these things can go. It's just amazing because we start.
Chris,
no, and I'm not trying to stop it. But because we've talked about like all the little differences, and it's just so funny that's a common theme that's winding through. And I know, Jerry, you're going to bring up the wind turbine thing. I started to watch your YouTube video talking in front of the New Jersey Senate about that issue.
I grew up in the Jersey Shore. I told you about how I left the surf and everything. I grew up as a beach bum, clam. Some would say clam digger. A clam digger, so people know. It's like, I guess it was people that lived at the Jersey Shore, and they would actually dig clams in the bays and get clams. I don't see clams around that much anymore.
I only did that at Sandy Hook.
Yeah. But so when I hear that, like in California, do you know in California a wave is considered an important natural resource? So if you're going to build anything that's going to affect a surfing wave or any kind of wave, there has to be a whole environmental impact statement and everything. And I think that's an awesome law. And then they're always trying to take the beach to themselves, like private people trying to take the beaches. So in Hawaii, there's a law that says, and one way they'll try to take the beaches in New Jersey is they'll put all their stuff out, their chairs and you can't sit, and they're taking the beach. So what Hawaii has a law, as I understand it, that if any hotel puts chairs on the beach, anyone's allowed to sit in them. So when I hear these issues about the Jersey Shore and stuff being messed up, it affects me deeply. I get really annoyed about it. So when I heard that you were involved with the proposals to put electric wind turbine windmills off the Jersey Shore, I was really interested in that. And that's one of the reasons I had asked you to come on to talk about. So can you tell us what's going on with that? What's the situation? Why is it bad? Where do we stand with that?
So it's almost a couple of years ago now. I'm driving, I have a house in Long Beach Island. I also live in Little Silver, which is near the shore. I have a house in Long Beach Island, and I'm driving there, and I see a sign, and the sign says, "Move them out." I'm like, "Move what out? What are we talking about?" So
When you get someone like Chris Placitella
gonna
that
say.
asks that question, watch out.
So I said, move what out? So I did a little digging, and I find out they're going to build these turbines. So I contacted a public official, remain nameless, and I said, what's the deal with this? And they said to me, oh, don't worry about it. There'll just be specs on the horizon. No big deal. I'm like, okay, I'll go back to sleep. Just give me something to read so I can rest my mind, and I'll leave it at that. So I met with people who should know, and they handed me the construction and operation report for this company, Atlantic Shores, which is the company with one of the companies that got a license to build the windmills. And I'm reading through the report, and I'm like, excuse the expression, holy shit. Did anyone ever get to page like 2,000?
Environmental impact
Right?
statement.
Did anybody even get to page 2,000 here? Or would they stop at page 50? I said, do you have any idea how big these things are going to be? People would think about wind turbines. They're like the height of what you see when you go into Atlantic City. Those are about 250 feet. These are 1,250 feet, right? They are the height of the Eiffel Tower, 2 times the height of the Washington Monument, right? 3 times the height of the Statue of Liberty. And they're visible for up to 40 miles, right? They have them planned for 9 miles, 8 to 9 miles off the coast. So then I'm looking a little deeper, and it says, and they actually have simulations of what it will look like. I'm like, oh my God, has anyone seen these photos? So then I start digging a little deeper, and I'm like, yeah, but here, there's all this debate in the news about, well, is it killing the whales? And I'm like, but here it says that the damage to the environment will be unavoidable. It says it's unavoidable. Whales will die. It's unavoidable. The fishing industry, it says the fishing industry will be destroyed. It says that it's the words they use are irretrievable, right? It says that. There's no question about it. It's right in the documents. Then the environmental impact statement comes out, and it's worse. So I've been up and down the coast speaking to different groups, and I will tell you, it's frustrating because you could be in Belmar or Spring Lake or Long Beach Island, and you could talk to 100 people, 70 will have no idea, even to this day, about what's going on. Now, so I'm thinking, boy, this is terrible. What did I discover only a month ago? I missed a couple of paragraphs buried in the environmental impact statement. What did they say? All those simulations that I looked at, they're total misrepresentations of what it will look like. They probably show less than 30% of what you will actually see.
Wow.
I thought, for example, off of Long Beach Island, you would only see 200 turbines. Now, 200 turbines, the height of the Eiffel Tower, that will fence in Long Beach Island.
Wow.
Okay? And they'll be visible all the way up here, right? But what do I find? What's the overall plan for the state of New Jersey? How many turbines do they have planned? 2,416 turbines from Sandy Hook to Cape May, right? That's what we're facing. Think about that. That will, surfing, you think that's not going to affect the waves?
Yeah.
Right? Fishing, that's what we're looking at. Right? Now here's the kicker. Insult to injury. A good part of that power looks like it's going to New York. It's not even going to New Jersey.
Right.
So I send a Oprah request to the BPU, Board of Public Utilities, who's responsible for approving, because they're supposed to look at the net economic benefit and costs. And I say, first thing, it says, okay, well, what's the effect on tourism? What's the effect on property values? How did that come into your calculation? Oh no, we didn't, that wasn't part of the calculation. Oh, okay. Then I'm digging deeper, because this is what lawyers do, right? I'm digging deeper in the BPU website, and I see they have a request for funding. So what's the request for funding for? They want to do a study about whether the turbines can survive a hurricane.
Wow, yeah.
Are you kidding me? Are you kidding me that you have a plan for 2,400 turbines, the height of the Eiffel Tower, and you don't know if they can survive a hurricane? Right? Do you see what happened in Nantucket last weekend?
No.
Last weekend in Nantucket, which they have some turbines that are about a fraction of the height, one blade from one of the turbines fell off, and all the fiberglass and everything, they shut down all the beaches.
Oh, wow.
All right? That was one blade from one turbine. What happens if the turbines can't survive a Category 3 hurricane?
Oh, God.
Right?
Yeah.
What happens? What are we facing? My dad used to say to me when I would drive to him, I was born in Newark, and we would drive up to see my grandmother, and I'd say, "Ooh, Dad, turnpike is,
Oh, the smell. Remember the smell?
Smell and the smoke."
Yeah.
And he said, "Chris, don't worry about it. God put the turnpike here to keep everybody outside of New Jersey so we can have the shore to ourselves." Right? So who would have?
Yeah.
But now we're talking about putting the turnpike on New Jersey's beaches.
Yeah.
The plan, and they actually will say, there are words in these documents. They're not my words. I'll send you the copy of the white paper I did. There are actually words that say, we'll industrialize the view, right? They have simulations. So I heard people say the other day, well, I'm just a fisherman. I'm out in the Barnegat Bay. I won't see him. I said, yeah, here, look at this visual. You see what this is? This is from the Rutgers Field Station. This is on the other side of the Barnegat Bay, near Tuckerton, right? All the way on the other side of the Barnegat Bay. This is what you see I said, you see what it says here?
Yeah.
It says under the picture, or in the next paragraph, the only way you'll be able to avoid looking at them is to turn your back. That's what it says in their documents.
Wow.
So I say to people, you know what? This is like the contract where they bury the bad stuff in the back. The company's going to be able to say, we didn't withhold anything.
Yeah.
We told you what was going to happen, right? Boehm is going to say, we didn't withhold anything. We told you what's going to, but people don't know. And you know what? Our politicians have no clue. They have no idea. Do you know, in the middle of all this, when all this started to pave the road, one of the things that happened is all the local towns gave up home rule. In other words, they couldn't object to stuff that was going through their town. There was a bill passed to give up home rule, but I'm sure the politicians had no idea what was being passed. Do you know that they're going to put, somebody told me the other day, they're putting the cabling for the northern section of these turbines through Seagirt.
Oh.
The cabling is coming right through I guess it's the Coast Guard station, through Seagirt. Somebody told me the other day, an engineer, that the cabling that's going through Seagirt will move power 10 times that of the Oyster Creek nuclear power plant on a daily basis. Think about that. There'll be electricity going through Seagirt and out to the west to the substations that is 10 times the power that's generated in an Oyster Creek nuclear power plant.
But that doesn't sound like a bad thing.
Well, I don't
Well,
know.
it's not nuclear power. It's just a lot of.
I don't want all that. I don't want all that going under my underground. Yeah. But and somebody was saying, I go to give these talks, like I gave a talk in Margate. Like
The turbines I get, but the electric and cable.
Yeah. So what's going to happen to get it there? We'll see. But so I gave a talk. There were like 500 people at this place in Margate, and it was probably a lot more red than blue, right? And I said, okay, well, I'm going to give you 4 reasons not to listen to anything I have to say.
Yeah.
I said, 1, I am for green energy.
Yeah.
2, I'm a lifelong Democrat, right? 3, I drove an electric car here, right? And 4, I'm a trial lawyer.
Yeah.
Well, they all booed. It was kind of funny.
Yeah.
But the truth of the matter is that it's real.
Yeah. What was the group that you're?
It was
like a town hall.
It was a town hall meeting.
Okay.
And I'll go any place, anywhere to deal with it. And I'm for the green energy.
Yeah, of course.
But don't put 2,000 turbines literally in the whale migration. It's literally, there's a map. It's literally in the whale migration area.
I was in LBI this past weekend.
Right.
Saw a whale. I
Right.
lifeguarded for 10 years. Saw a whale maybe one time. It was an orca like breaching up. It
Right.
was amazing.
Yeah,
So,
amazing.
so what's the status of all this, and where can people go to get involved? We'll put that in the link in the show notes too.
There are a number of organizations. There's Save LBI. There's Defend Brigantine Beach. I think there's one up in Long Branch now. But I tell people, educate your neighbors.
Yeah.
There's going to come a time they're going to come back to the legislature for more money.
Yeah.
And have your voices heard.
Yeah.
They're going to be there's a bunch of lawsuits to try to slow things down, make people take a second look. I mean, and I'm involved in some of that, but get the word out.
Yeah. Who is there, like a corporation driving it that's behind it? Like,
Well, there are a number of corporations. Atlantic Shores is in partnership with Shell. There's Empire Wind. There are a number of corporations.
Right.
Most of them are foreign corporations, by the way. Do you know that the companies that are coming here, they have a requirement in Europe. You can't put them in under 25 miles, right? And they can't be 1,000 feet. The same companies are here putting them at 9 miles, at 1,200 feet.
Right.
So it's a serious.
Yeah.
It's a serious issue. It will change our shore if it goes through forever. But I'm not giving up. This is what I do nights
Yeah.
and weekends. Last night I was reading cases
That's awesome.
on public nuisance and the Environmental Rights Act and what can people do to stop it.
We got to get Alan Cantor involved on that one.
Yeah.
He knows that stuff like the back of his hand. Alan Cantor is a great environmental lawyer, and
So
based
thanks
in
for
New
letting me
Orleans.
spout off.
Yeah.
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 Well, that's awesome,
Yeah.
Chris, and thank you for doing that. I mean, that's another awesome public interest thing that you're involved in that benefits, in my opinion, everyone.
It's
Oh
great.
yeah, big time.
Yeah.
And you're right. It's a big time, like something going on in our backyards that a ton of people don't even have any idea about.
No clue.
Cool. So, Oscar, we'll put that in the show notes too. Some of those links.
Yeah. So thank you.
Yeah, Mark's got to get to his big brief. He's got to right
thank
here.
you.
My big brief is at lunch.
Yeah. Chris, thanks again. It was awesome. Appreciate it.
Yeah, Chris, thank you very much.
I'm good.